Hey there! Since it's getting to be spooky season again, I thought I'd take the opportunity to share some of my spooky, creepy, horror, terror, whatever kind of reads have scared or disturbed me over the years. If you hear some weird noises in the background, I'm not actually being attacked by bears. I just have two small dogs rolling around on the carpet just out of view. So I was going to start with this one, Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I read this book for the first time when I was in middle school, so maybe 12 or 13 years old. The school librarian gave it to me because I was reading some written for kids kinds of spooky stories, and she was like, oh, if you like that, you should try Shirley Jackson. And I've never looked back. I love everything that Shirley Jackson writes. She has this mixture of the domestic and the terrifying all at the same time. And in so many of her stories, there's not exactly anything supernatural going on, but it is still scary as heck. So I'm going to read a little bit from from towards the beginning of the book. If you haven't read this one before, the main character and the narrator of the story is a young girl named Mary Cat. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding the history of the family, especially in the beginning of the book, where you get all these hints that there's something weird that happened in the past, and the community feels strange about Mary Cat and about her whole family now. So this is a part where she's going to the grocery store to pick up some groceries. It never mattered who was in the grocery. I was always served at once. Mr. Elbert or his pale, greedy wife always came right away from wherever they were in the store to get me what I wanted. Sometimes, if their older boy was helping out in school vacation, they hurried to make sure that he was not the one who waited on me. And once when a little girl, a child strange to the village of course, came close to me in the grocery, Mrs. Elbert pulled her back so roughly that she screamed. And then there was a long, still minute while everyone waited before Mrs. Elbert took a breath and said, "Anything else?" I always stood perfectly straight and stiff when the children came close because I was afraid of them. I was afraid that they might touch me and the mothers would come at me like a flock of taloned hawks. That was always the picture I had in my mind, birds descending, striking, gashing with razor claws. Today I had a great many things to buy for Constance, and it was a relief to see that there were no children in the store and not many women. Take an extra turn, I thought, and said to Mr. Elbert, "Good morning." He nodded to me. He could not go entirely without greeting me, and yet the women in the store were watching. I turned my back to them, but I could feel them standing behind me, holding a can or a half-filled bag of cookies or a head of lettuce, not willing to move until I had gone out through the door again, and the wave of talk began, and they were swept back into their own lives. Mrs. Donnell was back there somewhere. I had seen her as I came in, and I wondered as I had before if she came on purpose when she knew I was coming, because she always tried to say something. She was one of the few who spoke. "A roasting chicken," I said to Mr. Elbert, and across the store his greedy wife opened up the refrigerated case and took out the chicken and began to wrap it. "A small leg of lamb," I said. "My Uncle Julian always fancies a roasted lamb in the first spring days." I should not have said it. I knew, and a little gasp went around the store like a scream. I could make them run like rabbits, I thought, if I said to them what I really wanted to, but they would only gather outside again and watch for me there. "Onions," I said politely to Mr. Elbert. "Coffee, bread, flour, walnuts," I said, "and sugar. We are very low on sugar." Somewhere behind me there was a little horrified laugh, and Mr. Elbert glanced past me briefly, and then to the items he was arranging on the counter. In a minute, Mrs. Elbert would bring my chicken and my meat wrapped and set them down by the other things. I need not turn around until I was ready to go. "2 quarts of milk," I said, "a half pint of cream, a pound of butter." The Harrises had stopped delivering dairy goods to us 6 years ago, and I brought milk and butter home from the grocery now. And a dozen eggs. Constance had forgotten to put eggs on the list, but there had only been 2 at home. "A box of peanut brittle," I said. Uncle Julian would clatter and crunch over his papers tonight and go to bed sticky. "The Blackwoods always did set a fine table." That was Mrs. Donnell, speaking clearly from somewhere behind me, and someone giggled, and someone else said, "Shh!" I never turned. It was enough to feel them all there in the back of me without looking into their flat gray faces with the hating eyes. I wish you were all dead, I thought, and longed to say it out loud. Constance said, never let them see you care, and if you pay attention, they'll only get worse. And probably it was true, but I wished they were dead. I would have liked to have come into the grocery some morning and see them all, even the Alberts and the children, lying there crying with the pain and dying. I would then help myself to the groceries, I thought, stepping over their bodies, taking whatever I fancied from the shelves and go home, with perhaps a kick for Mrs. Donnell while she lay there. I was never sorry when I had thoughts like this. I only wished they would come true. It's wrong to hate them, Constance said. It only weakens you. But I hated them anyway, and wondered why it had been worthwhile creating them in the first place. Mrs. Elbert put all my groceries together on the counter and waited, looking past me into the distance. That's all I want today, I said, and without looking at me, he wrote the prices on a slip and added, then passed a slip to me so I could make sure he had not cheated me. I always made a point of checking his figures carefully, though he never made a mistake. There were not many things I could do to get back at them, but I did what I could. The groceries filled my shopping bag and another bag beside, and there was no way of getting them home except by carrying them. No one would ever offer to help me, of course, even if I would let them. Lose 2 turns. With my library books and my groceries, going slowly, I had to walk down the sidewalk, past the general store and into Stella's. I stopped in the doorway of the grocery, feeling around inside myself for some thought to make me safe. Behind me, the little stirrings and coughings began. They were getting ready to talk again, and across the width of the store, the Elberts were probably rolling their eyes at each other in relief. I froze my face hard. Today, I was going to think about taking our lunch out into the garden, and while I kept my eyes open just enough to see where I was walking, our mother's brown shoes going up and down, in my mind I was setting the table with a green cloth and bringing out yellow dishes and strawberries in a white bowl. Yellow dishes, I thought, feeling the eyes of the men looking at me as I went by. And Uncle Julian shall have a nice soft egg with toast broken into it, and I will remember to ask Constance to put a shawl across his shoulders, because it is still very early spring. Without looking, I could see the grinning and the gesturing. I wished they were all dead, and I was walking on their bodies. They rarely spoke directly to me, but only to each other. That's one of the Blackwood girls, I heard one of them say in a high, mocking voice. One of the Blackwood girls from Blackwood Farm. Too bad about the Blackwoods, someone else said, just loud enough. Too bad about those poor girls. Nice farm out there, they said. Nice land to farm. Man could get rich farming the Blackwood land. If he had 1,000,000 years and 3 heads and didn't care what grew, a man could get rich. Keep their land pretty well locked up, the Blackwoods do. Man could get rich. Too bad about the Blackwood girls. Never can tell what'll grow on Blackwood land. I am walking on their bodies, I thought. We are having lunch in the garden, and Uncle Julian is wearing his shawl. I always held my groceries carefully along here because one terrible morning I had dropped the shopping bag and the eggs broke and the milk spilled, and I gathered up whatever I could while they shouted, telling myself that whatever I did, I would not run away. Shoveling cans and boxes and spilled sugar wildly back into the shopping bag, telling myself not to run away. In front of Stella's there was a crack in the sidewalk that looked like a finger pointing. The crack had always been there. Other landmarks, like the handprint Johnny Harris made in the concrete foundation of the town hall and the Mueller boys' initials on the library porch, had been put in times that I remembered. I was in the 3rd grade at the school when the town hall was built, but the crack in the sidewalk in front of Stella's had always been there, just as Stella's had always been there. I remember roller skating across the crack and being careful not to step on it or it would break our mother's back, and riding a bicycle past here with my hair flying behind. The villagers had not openly disliked us then, although our father said they were trash. Our mother told me once that the crack was there when she was a girl in the Rochester house, so it must have been here when she married our father and went to live on Blackwood Farm. And I suppose the crack was there, like a finger pointing, from the time when the village was first put together out of old gray wood, and the ugly people with their evil faces were brought from some impossible place and set down in the houses to live. So I could read this all day. But what I loved about this section, and what I love about the whole book, is this. You've got a very ordinary scene of a girl going to the grocery store, and yet there's all this history bubbling up, and Mary Cat sounds very normal, and then she'll say something like, I am walking on their bodies, and you see her inner darkness. And when I read this the first time, I had never run into a narrator like that before, so it was an eye-opener. So if you've not read this one yet, I highly recommend We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. It's available as an audiobook. It's available in various print editions. This is an older one, but there's dozens. And there's a fairly decent movie edition of it that they made for Netflix, I think, kind of recently. It doesn't quite capture all of it for me the way it is in my head, but it's pretty good. Thank you for listening.